Well, welcome everyone to today's AMSECT webinar sponsored by Medtronic. First, I want to thank all of the participants for registering and taking time away from not only your clinical practice, but also your families to learn more about blood management. My name is Alicia Carroll. I have worked as a perfusion sales rep for Medtronic for the last 2 years, and prior to that, I worked as a clinical perfusionist for 13 years in the Tampa Bay area. My team also evaluated and utilized the autoLog IQ, and I hope you find the information presented to you today to be beneficial and enlightening. We appreciate this collaboration with AMSECT as we have the shared goal of improving patient care and safety through educational presentations like you will see today. Before we get started, just a little housekeeping. All participants will be muted throughout the webinar, but I encourage you to submit questions during the presentation by typing your question into the Q&A that is located in the taskbar at the bottom of your screen. The presentation will not take the full hour, and we will spend time afterward answering your questions. I will be moderating this webinar today along with my colleague, Rich Smith.
Thanks, Alicia, and good evening, everyone. My name is Rich Smith. I'm also a perfusionist working for Medtronic, supporting extracorporeal technology sales and customers in Northern Ohio. As Alicia mentioned, Medtronic would like to thank AMSECT for the opportunity to present today. Alicia and I have the honor of guest hosting tonight's webinar, standing in for a face and name you may be more familiar with. Ashley Walczak, our Global Product Manager for Blood Management at Medtronic. Ashley is currently on maternity leave as she and her husband, Rich, have welcomed a new baby girl to their family. We wish Ashley, Rich, and the Walczak family our best. Today, we're fortunate to have Matt Wittenauer, staff perfusionist at the Cleveland Clinic, presenting Every Drop Counts, how the autoLog IQ has transformed the Cleveland Clinic's autotransfusion program. Matt Wittenauer is an expert in cardiovascular perfusion and leading educator in the field. His career began as a perfusion assistant in Youngstown, Ohio, where he provided autotransfusion services across a range of medical scenarios, from outpatient procedures and trauma to cardiac surgery. This foundational experience led him to further his expertise at the Cleveland Clinic School of Cardiovascular Perfusion, where he earned a post-baccalaureate certificate. Matt's academic background is robust: a Bachelor of Science in Microbiology from The Ohio State University, a Master in Education from the Cleveland Clinic State University. This combination of scientific acumen and educational insight fueled his passion for teaching and mentoring in the field of perfusion. For the past 12 years, Matt has been a key member of the Cleveland Clinic perfusion team. He has contributed in multiple capacities, including management of quality control for autotransfusion, serving as clinical instructor, overseeing ECMO simulation. His leadership as program director at the Cleveland Clinic School of Cardiovascular Perfusion from 2019 to 2014 was instrumental in shaping the field of perfusion education and the careers of many professionals in the field. Matt has also made significant contributions to the academic community, authoring papers published in the Annals of Thoracic Surgery and presenting to the American Academy of Cardiovascular Perfusion. Outside his life, or professional life, Matt enjoys boating on the lake and attending Cleveland Guardians baseball games with his wife, Carrie, and their 2 sons. Matt is a wonderful colleague and a good friend. I'm thrilled for him to share his experiences with all of you tonight. Matt?
Thanks, Rich. I just want to start off by thanking you and Alicia for the wonderful introduction and for moderating this session here today. And I want to thank everyone at Medtronic and AMSECT for putting on this webinar series and giving me the opportunity to share our experience here at Cleveland Clinic with the autoLog IQ. So pictured here is the Heart and Vascular Institute at Cleveland Clinic that has been home to cardiac surgery here since the building opened in 2008. So a little bit about Cleveland Clinic's main campus. It's a 173-acre campus It has 60 buildings, although every time you look a new direction, it seems like that number is going up as new buildings are being constructed. 1,300 beds. We run about 14 to 15 cardiac ORs every day, with an average of about 18 cases per day. We have 16 cardiac surgeons and 34 perfusionists. In 2023, our thoracic and cardiovascular surgery case volume was over 7,700 cases, with over 70% of them being cardiac cases, with a small amount of pediatric and then thoracic cases as well. For our adult cardiac surgery, the volume has been steadily increasing over the last 4 years, up to 5,630 last year. These operations encompassed everything imaginable from a cardiac surgery standpoint. We had percutaneous valves, isolated CABG, isolated valves, combined cases, aortic cases, redos, basically anything that can be done in cardiac surgery, we're doing it here, and a lot of it. So from an autotransfusion standpoint, our main goals for perioperative autotransfusion are to return red blood cells to the patient with the highest quantity and quality, create the least amount of waste, and complete this as quickly as possible so that we can reduce the amount of time that the red blood cells are outside of the patient. Our benefits for autotransfusion are going to be financially, the reduced cost of administering bank blood, which cost varies obviously from $550 to $1,100. The cost associated with transfusion-related reactions, as well as clerical errors that can occur during type and cross-matching. So the original first-generation autolog was adopted here at Cleveland Clinic in 2007 after a trial with all of the different cell saver manufacturers available at the time. The autolog was chosen because it was easy to set up and operate, had a very small footprint, both in the OR and for storing disposables. It proved to have a consistent product, was easy to clean, created minimal waste, and was relatively inexpensive at the time. So our first generation autolog was used from 2007 to 2018, and it was a standard operation for efficient cell salvage. The key features that we appreciated with that device were the simple logic structure, its automatic operation, the one bowl size at only 135 ml, one-piece disposable kit. It was very easy to learn, set up, operate, and troubleshoot, and the autolog manual was easy to get through at only 34 pages. So in 2017, kind of the state of autotransfusion devices at Cleveland Clinic's main campus, our general operating room team, they had 6 Brats, 8 Elites, and then 4 of the first generation autolog. Our pediatric cardiac ORs used 3 of the Fresenius Cats, and then our adult cardiac ORs had 17 of these first generation autologs. So all of our equipment here is on a 10-year life cycle for devices. So at this point, we were looking for new devices to replace our autologs, which had served us well for the past 10 years. So that led us to our cell saver trials that took place in 2018. We chose to trial 3 new cell saver models that were considered. 2 of them had a Latham bowl, which were the Sorin Extra and the Haemonetics Elite. and then one with the IntelliPath bowl, which was the Medtronic autoLog IQ. So the autoLog IQ offered this IntelliPath bowl, which had an adaptive two-stage fill. So the first fill was used to compact the red blood cells, and then the second one to concentrate the hematocrit. And then it also had a pulse wash, which allowed the saline to better penetrate and wash away byproducts. So this picture, I think, is one of our favorite ones from the trial process of the three devices next to each other outside of one of our operating rooms. And just on quick glance at this picture, the thing that stands out the most to us was the sheer size difference between the three devices, with the autoLog IQ having a much, much smaller footprint. And as I'm sure everyone experiences, space in the hospital and in the operating rooms comes at a premium. So anything to reduce the footprint and have more space was certainly a bonus. So given our history with the first generation autoLog, the autoLog IQ was our device to beat for these trials. It would offer seamless integration as there were no changes to the existing supply chain because the new model used the same disposables as the first generation autoLog. There were many improvements made on the original model, and the 11-year track record for our results established by the first generation autoLog machines. So our main considerations amongst the three devices were, of course, cost of the machines and disposables, the size, speed of processing, the quality of the product, ease of use for the devices, as well as other novel features. So for this process, our blood bank developed a very rigorous qualification process. This started with assembly and clinical engineering checks, and then every device that came through here went through simulations with human blood. So we used expired red blood cells with anticoagulant and saline to help replicate OR conditions. So that blood was diluted out to hematocrit of 15%. And we measured pre and post heparin and hematocrit. And then each device was tested 3 separate times. So for those tests, we took results from the first and third bowl processed for each one. The results that we were looking for were a hematocrit greater than 45%, potassium less than 2 millimoles per liter, and heparin less than 0.5 IUs per ml. And then the 3-test average for each device is what we reported on our sheets. So this is an example of the blood bank validation sheets that we had as part of our binder for each device that came in. So number 8 on the left explains the product simulation processing, going through how to complete all of the tests, check boxes to make sure that each one is being done the same way. And then in 9.4.1 was the reporting of the results, the averages for bowls 1 and 3, and then whether or not they were acceptable and within range. So this sheet was used to greenlight all of the devices to make it to the next step, which was our OR evaluation and clinical trials. For this process, we ran 20 cases for each device. So we took input from approximately 30 perfusionists using a standardized survey. And for our clinical trials, we sent QC results from the second bowl processed for each device. And again, looking for the same parameters of hematocrit greater than 45%, potassium less than 2, and the heparin less than 0.5. So for our clinical trials, we chose to use the second bowl process just to make sure that we had no influence from saline that was used to prime the reinfusion line on any of the devices, to make sure that we were getting a true hematocrit result from each device and each bowl that we ran. And then we had the similar sheets for the performance qualification, where we reported those results, and then went from there to certify the device. And then this is what we used the same way for qualifying and validating all devices coming into clinical use at Cleveland Clinic. So for the Sorin Extra, we trialed multiple bowl sizes using the 125 ml and 175 ml. The device offered custom wash cycles. For the purposes of our trial, we used the default recommended settings for each bowl size. It had a hematocrit sensor, which was pre and post wash. It had exposed storage at the base of the device. It offered data printouts. For us, it was a difficult latch to close reservoir mechanism, and then had a very cumbersome user manual at over 200 pages. The Haemonetics Elite also offered multiple bowl sizes to choose from, and we trialed the 225 ml bowl. It also offered custom wash profiles, data management, maintenance self-check on startup, and exposed storage at the base of the device. It also had the ability to send data through Bluetooth, which we were intrigued by its potential for inventory management. And then there was the autoLog IQ, which retained all of the desirable qualities of the original first generation device. It only uses 250 mLs of wash for its one bowl size. It had the IntelliPath bowl design, allowing an increased RBC pack, the pulsatile wash to increase the saline penetration. It had an auto start function where it would return to the reservoir automatically if not a full bowl. And it was fast, producing 1.5 bowls in the times that others could produce 1 bowl. So some other features of the autoLog IQ that were improvements from the original model were, from a setup standpoint, the vertical manifold orientation made for an easier installation. It also offered a storage drawer. The vacuum that was on board was now whisper quiet as opposed to the previous model, and it had a vapor trap. The device supported 2 reservoirs. It had a fold-away shopping cart handle for moving the device, which, you know, is great when you have to move the device around, but if it's sitting in one spot in the operating room for a while, being able to fold that down and just take up less physical space in the OR was a definite positive for us. And the new touchscreen was a clear interface that was easy to use. The autoLog IQ also had an updated logic structure. So from self-start enabled, when with the appropriate weight of approximately 800 cc's, it would begin to fill. If it was able to get a full bowl out of that, it would wash and empty and then return to fill again. If it was not able to get a full bowl from the fill, it gave 3 options available for the user. The options were to concentrate, to wash a partial bowl, or to return to the reservoir and be done and back to the self-start. So one of the big improvements we saw with this, with the autoLog IQ, was that if no action was taken by the user, it would automatically return the bowl to the reservoir and go back to self-start, meaning that you would not have to take your attention away from what else you were doing or running the heart-lung machine to respond to the needs of the autoLog. So just a quick summary of the kind of what our trial looked like. We had Medtronic autoLog IQ only has the one bowl size, 135 mLs. We trialed the 125 and 175 for the Soren Extra and the 225 for the Hemonetics. We used the standard and default wash programs for each one. And one of the areas that stood out as a big difference between the three devices was in the wash volume, and that for a bowl with the Medtronic autoLog IQ, it only required 250 mLs of wash volume as opposed to 900 mLs or a liter with the other devices. So this meant that we were going through saline bags much less quickly and were able to process more bowls without having to change out the saline bags. It also allows us to use the 1 liter bags of saline for our wash on the devices rather than a 3 liter bag, which of course offers less intervention and needing to change it. But obviously, again, space and storage, 3 liter bags of saline take up a lot more space than the 1 liter bags. So the results of our cell saver trials, the autoLog IQ produced the most consistent results and the highest quality products out of all of the devices. The Soren Extra, we actually had 2 of the devices failed their initial blood bank qualification and were unable to be used for the clinical portion of the trial. And with the Hemonetics Elite, we saw a little bit of heparin washout inconsistency in our results. So why did we end up choosing the autoLog IQ? It was a reliable, consistent, and simple, offering standardization in terms of bowl selection, wash programs, and everything else that we were doing. As a large perfusion group, keeping things as standardized as possible helps keep more consistent results, as well as with having a perfusion school here and training new students on a yearly basis, it helps keep that process a little bit more consistent. It also had a low wash volume at 250 mLs, so we can use the 1 liter saline bags for wash and heparin bag, as I mentioned before. A very small footprint in the operating room. The built-in vacuum, which was much quieter, and the device was very easy to clean. So the wash kit tray holder is underneath the centrifuge drain for when it needs to be cleaned out. In terms of use of the autoLog IQ outside of our kind of standard cardiac cases, for cases where we have minimal bleeding, it's easy to just set up the reservoir only and then set up the bowl if needed. For our thoracoabdominal aneurysms, which is what the picture is showing here, we use 2 reservoirs connected together with a transfer pack to a rapid infusion device. And then in the setting of just absolutely massive bleeding, because of the size of the device, it's easy to bring a second autoLog IQ in and be able to process from both devices and 2 bowls at once. And then in the most extreme cases, there is room to bring 3 of the devices in and have them all working in tandem. This is the aftermath of a thoracoabdominal aneurysm that was complicated by a moderate intraoperative coagulopathy, or at least that's what the operative report said, where the blood loss was enough that we went to 2 autolog IQs, and then eventually got a 3rd one to help try and keep up and process the blood as it was being lost. But then when you look more closely at what necessitated this, the first machine processed over 11 liters of blood. The second machine processed over 12 liters of blood. And then the third one processed over 20 liters of blood in this period of time. So the amount of volume and blood loss it took to overwhelm a single machine and require 2 or 3 of them was an incredibly high number. And this is something we do very, very infrequently. For the vast majority of our cases, it's the single autolog with the bowl and have no problems keeping up with the blood loss. Or if we need to use a second reservoir with the single bowl, that was kind of our next step. But this is something that we do very infrequently while doing a lot of cases, complex redos, thoracoabdominals, aortic frozen elephant trunk cases, things that tend to encounter a lot of bleeding, and the autolog fits our need for what we need. From a quality control standpoint, we did 6 months of monthly hematocrit, potassium, and heparin testing for the devices. At this point, oversight of autotransfusion changed from our blood bank to surgical operations. So with this change, it was decided to do monthly testing, continue monthly testing of ABGs for the hematocrit and potassium, and then no future heparin testing due to the number of results we had where there was never heparin detected in the results. So they decided to forego future heparin testing and just instead focus on the hematocrit and potassium. So we did this for 2 years of monthly ABG results for all of our devices. In this time span, we had minimal failures. Most of them were able to be traced to user error rather than machine error. We developed an algorithm to try and kind of pinpoint what user error looks like in the ABG results, whether it was an accidental dilution of the product when priming the transfusion filter, or accidentally washing with plasma light. So we got very consistent results over this time. Because of this consistency, we were able to switch to every other month for sending our ABGs. So this is our QC table for hematocrit from January of 2022 to January of 2024 for all of our devices. The orange boxes are hematocrits that were greater than 50%. The blue boxes were hematocrits greater than 60%. The green boxes were hematocrits greater than 70%. As you can see, the published range of hematocrits that comes along with the autolog IQ, which is up to 65%, the kind of real clinical results that we were seeing here over all of these samples and all of these devices, many of them were well in excess of that. The grayed out boxes here were QC is not done due to the machines being out for service. And then I have no table for potassium that would be similar to this because everything would look the same with the results are under 2.0 for nearly all of the samples. So going back to looking at our kind of encounters and autotransfusion data from 2008 with the original autoLog up to 2023 with the autoLog IQ. Last year, we had about 5,000 total encounters for autotransfusion. The volume salvaged was just shy of 3 million mLs of blood. The average amount returned per autotransfusion encounter was 580 mLs. This was equivalent to 9,703 units of packed red blood cells, about 769 gallons of blood processed last year or returned last year, and the potential cost savings for the Institute of $7.3 million. So in closing, the autoLog IQ at Cleveland Clinic, it underwent a rigorous evaluation. During that, it outperformed all of the competition. And then it continues to be a consistent and reliable device that we have chosen for our autotransfusion needs in the past and the present and into the future at Cleveland Clinic. Thank you.
Matt, thank you. What an excellent job. Thank you for your informative presentation. The attention and effort that the Cleveland Clinic has done to make sure new devices are properly qualified before being rolled in the OR and used on patients is exemplary. Just the lengths you guys go to ensure the quality of autotransfusion is maintained through the life of the device and every single day you take care of your patients is so incredible. We're going to take some time here. We're going to open it up to participants for questions. Quick reminder, submit your questions by typing it into the Q&A located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. A few questions have come in already. Alicia and I will sort through those. And as we wait for a few more folks to submit questions, we wanted to jump on one thing right away. So Matt, excellent presentation. The one thing that really sticks out is that QC page that you showed with all the blue and all the green, just detailing the consistent, high quality, high hematocrit product your team reports. The hematocrit, as you mentioned, it's higher than we promote on our brochures. And when I see that, a few things come to mind. Is the Cleveland Clinic manipulating the device in any way to achieve these results? And then I guess second to that would be, are you ensuring that the end product is mixed prior to sampling? If a red blood cell bag is left for a period of time, it can settle, and that might result in some unusually high or aired high sample concentrations. Can you speak to that a little bit, please?
Yeah, absolutely. To answer the first part of your question, no, we are not doing anything different. We're running the standard wash, fill, everything with the machine for all of our cases. So there's no manipulation whatsoever of the machine. And yes, the samples are typically taken immediately following cardiopulmonary bypass, making sure that the bag is mixed. We're drawing them right away and then sending them down to our blood gas lab.
All right. Thank you, Matt. One other question just regarding your quality controls. Can you tell everybody what kind of lab instrumentation you're using to measure those results?
Yeah, so we send them down to our blood gas lab in the basement here at the Heart and Vascular Institute, and they are using the Radiometer ABL 800 Flex blood gas analyzer.
Okay. Yeah, I think, you know, it's interesting to point out some people will run them on point of care devices. Others will send their results down to lab. And I think, you know, that's probably the most accurate that you're going to get. We have some questions coming into the chat. The first question is, why didn't you include the Fresenius cats in the trial?
So our pediatric colleagues were using the Fresenius cats, and I think we were looking at kind of the speed of processing, and you know, I think that was something that we considered the other three and thought would be a better fit for our program.
Sure, that's fair. Matt, we have a question coming in from Europe. Did your center suffer from supply back orders this past year? Inventory for cell salvage in Europe was quite challenging.
No, we were fortunate enough to never have any issues with supply chain for our autologs. We do have second vendors for many of our products, but our autotransfusion, we only use the autoLog IQ, and we've never had a problem with either the reservoirs, the bowls, or the suction lines. So I don't know if it's because they're only producing one size bowl that it's maybe a little bit easier to keep up with it because you're consistently producing one size bowl as opposed to trying to produce multiple different ones. But no, we were very fortunate to not have to worry about that this past year.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matt. Trying to organize some of these questions here. We have a question coming in, thanking you for an insightful presentation. You had mentioned ease of use as a consideration. Perfusionists are responsible for so much during a procedure and certainly do not need the extra stress of tending to alarms. Can you comment on perfusion required interventions with the autoLog IQ?
They're very minimal. As long, you know, after setting it up and starting collection, as long as it's in self-start mode, it will process automatically. It's, you know, easy to look over and see that it's processing. If it gets a full bowl, it will wash it up to the reinfusion bag and try and wash the rest so that you're never left with kind of that reservoir full of volume and it's stuck. And then once it gets to where it's unable to wash that full bowl, it does, after 1 minute of time, returns right back to the self-start mode. So you can kind of see everything that's happening without having to actually intervene with anything. When it does require some type of intervention or kind of wants to get your attention, the yellow light pops up on the screen kind of to let you know. But you know, you're able to kind of get there when time allows for it at that point. But in general, it's kind of a set it and forget it and just let it keep producing autologous packed red cells for you.
Matt, we have a question related to your results for potassium. I know you said they were consistent, but would you be able to share the parameters that you're measuring for potassium washout?
Which is less than 2 millimoles per liter is our target for potassium. So anything less than 2, and then if a result was ever greater than 2, we would resend another sample, and then it would, you know, the kind of the resend at that point would be less than 2. If we had multiple results above 2, then we would pull the device to have it inspected by the service team. But that's honestly not something that we've really encountered here with the potassium.
Okay, great. There are a few QC questions. One person is asking for timing for non-standard cases. At what time point do you sample for these cases? Or do you sample for your non-standard cases for your QCs?
No, so we do our QCs with our kind of planned cardiac cases You know, we're not really sampling them kind of in emergency cases. Even if we had planned on doing QCs for that case, if things aren't necessarily going as planned, you know, we would either, if it's able to get the QC, we would, but also if time doesn't allow for that because of the attention kind of on the situation at hand, then we would just send the QC on the next case the next day.
Thanks, Matt. And with those non-standard cases where the volume's coming in, the autolog has 3 modes, a standard, a fast, and emergency. Do you use any of those modes?
You know, when it's very, very infrequent, we will switch to the fast. Obviously, you know, you kind of have to balance the clinical situation happening in front of you with the patient. You know, if it's tolerable to do the standard wash, we'll do that. From a hemodynamic standpoint, if that's not tolerable from a volume standpoint, we will very, very, very infrequently switch to the fast or emergency mode, but for as short of time as possible, and then returning to the standard 250 wash. You know, I think that's where, if our options are going to emergency mode with one device to keep up, you know, we'll kind of default to getting that second machine in there and processing with a second machine at that standpoint, to try and be able to continue getting a good wash and product.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Somebody asked, did you mention a difference washing with plasma light?
Yes. So I'm blanking on what the parameter. There was a blood gas parameter that we noticed. It wouldn't have been sodium, but there was one blood gas parameter we noticed that if was washed with plasma light, it was higher. It was something that we weren't looking for. It was kind of like an incidental finding that gave us a clue that the plasma light was accidentally spiked as the wash rather than the normal saline.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know there are some pediatric centers that wash with plasma light to try to keep the potassium up. So it may have been potassium in those samples.
All right. Somebody had mentioned, given the small bowl size and quick turnaround, have you been able to expand autotransfusion service beyond cardiac surgery to other surgeries that could benefit from this service?
Yeah, so the devices for the non-cardiac surgery are the same ones that were listed there previously. The autotransfusion team at that time, when we got all of our new autolog IQs to replace the first generation autologs, there was an internal push from the autotransfusion team to just replace all of theirs with the autolog IQs as well. So that way it was just kind of standard across the board for everybody. And they were happy with the devices. But from a budget standpoint, it was not in the budget for that team to kind of replace all of their cell savers. So they have not done that. And I'm not sure about when they will life cycle their devices. I do know that they still have some of our original autologs that they kept as devices to be able to use kind of when they need to.
There is a question. So how soon after processing do you send the sample for testing for your QCs? So I said, is it 10 minutes? Is it an hour? How quickly is that? Are you sampling and turning it around?
Usually within 5 minutes, I would say. As you know, as soon as the blood is processed and makes it up to the bag, if we don't get the sample right away, our anesthesia teams are usually pretty quick to grab the line and want all the volume back. So it's usually holding them off for a minute or two while we're able to grab a sample and then immediately send it down to the blood gas lab.
There was another question about wash for each wash type. So our standard wash is 250 mLs, our fast wash is 100 mLs, and our emergency wash is a no wash.
Another question about connectivity. Do you connect your autolog IQ to your heart-lung machine, or what is your connectivity / data management setup?
No, we don't use that feature or anything like that with the autolog IQ. We input the data into our EMR, which we use Epic, and then the results, the amount of blood, kind of return to the patient. So we don't track and store the information for individual bowls, just the general machine data, lot numbers, and then the amount of blood returned to the patient at the end.
Okay. I think we will have time for maybe one more. Let's see. The Soren Extra allows for quick priming for our Jehovah's Witness population. Does the IQ have a function that allows for this? I guess I'm not familiar with the quick prime.
Sure, I can jump on this one. I think what they're referring to here is the ability to prime the red blood cell infusion bag with some saline in order to form a closed loop when taking care of some Jehovah's Witness populations. Not all Jehovah's Witness populations require that closed loop, but yes, our device does allow you, by hitting the function key, to send some of the saline from the wash bag into the reinfusion bag to make that full circle.
And that is a feature that we do use here for the population that requires that.
Well, excellent. I mean, great questions, everybody. Thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your experience with our, uniquely intelligent, easy, and adaptable autolog IQ. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We appreciate your interest in this topic, and we hope that you would consider implementing some of the autotransfusion qualification techniques, or the next time you do an evaluation of your devices. Or perhaps you learned something when it comes to QC processes with the devices you currently have. If you wish to revisit any of these concepts, or you want to share this information with your colleagues, please visit the AMSECT website, where a recording of this presentation will be made available in their webinar library. And if there are any questions that we did not get to, please feel free to hop on LinkedIn, and you can easily message myself or Rich. We hope you found today's session informative and applicable to your practice. If you have any questions or you want more information, please, you can reach out to us or your local rep. And if you're unsure who that is, please contact myself or Rich. Lastly, Rich and I want to give a big shout out and a thank you to Natasha Joyner, our Senior Medical Education and Training Program Manager. Natasha has worked in the background to guide us and ensure that this webinar was a success. Thank you, Natasha, and to everybody who joined. We hope to see you again soon.